Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be looking at Waymo today.
The company that's like synonymous with self-driving cars, you know?
Yeah.
And I gotta say, the whole idea, it's still kind of like science fiction to me.
Yeah.
But luckily, I have an expert here to kind of walk us through all this.
So let's start with the basics.
What is Waymo, really, and how did it even start?
Well, Waymo is a company that's developing self-driving technology,
Okay.
and their goal is to make transportation safer.
More efficient and available to everybody.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that they actually evolved from the Google self-driving car project.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember hearing about Google and their self-driving car experiments.
Yeah.
So how did that project actually turn into the Waymo we know today?
Well, it goes back even further.
Oh.
To the early 2000s.
The Darfur Grand Challenges?
And those were basically races for driverless cars out in the desert.
And a team from Stanford.
Which included Sebastian Thrun,
Okay.
who would become a key figure at Google.
They actually won a couple of those challenges.
Wow.
And that early research and innovation laid the groundwork.
For what would become Waymo.
Wow. So from winning desert races to developing self-driving taxis.
That's quite a jump. Was there a turning point, though? Something that convinced Google to really invest heavily in this?
Well, there is a really interesting story about a project called Prebot, which involved a pizza-delivering Toyota Prius.
Wait, a pizza-delivering Prius?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to hear this story.
So back in 2008, before Google officially launched their self-driving car program,
An engineer named Anthony Lewandowski.
he retrofitted a Prius with sensors and tech.
To make it autonomous.
He wanted to show that self-driving could work in the real world.
Okay.
And he actually got permission from Larry Page and Sebastian Thrun at Google.
But they wanted to keep Google's name out of it initially.
That makes sense.
Yeah, a self-driving pizza car getting in an accident wouldn't be great PR.
Exactly. So this Prebot,
It actually delivered pizzas. Even driving across the San Francisco Bay Bridge?
with a police escort.
No way.
And it was this project that convinced Google to go all in on self-driving.
And that eventually led to Waymo.
So Prebo, the pizza-delivering Prius, was like the seed for Waymo.
I love that. Okay, so Google launched Project Chauffeur. That's the name I remember hearing.
Right.
What did they achieve with that?
Project Chauffeur is where things got serious.
Okay.
They invested over $1 billion between 2009 and 2015.
And they achieved some pretty amazing things.
Like what?
By 2015, they were doing fully driverless test rides.
On public road?
In a modified Toyota Prius.
Wow. So they were already pushing boundaries back then.
They even had an engineer take a 10-minute ride.
In a car with no steering wheel.
Or pedals.
Really?
Yeah, that was a major step towards fully autonomous vehicles.
So from Project Chauffeur, Waymo became his own company under Alphabet in 2016.
Which brings us to today.
So where are they now? Are these robo-taxis like actually out there picking people up?
They are. Waymo has robo-taxi services operating in Phoenix,
San Francisco.
and Los Angeles.
And they're providing over 100,000 paid rides every week.
100,000.
Wow.
Across those cities.
Okay, so this isn't just some experiment.
This is a real service that people are actually using.
Yes, it
That's
is.
incredible.
In those cities, you can actually use the Waymo app.
To hail a ride.
And it's a totally driverless experience.
Wow.
And they're planning to expand to Austin, Texas, too.
It seems like self-driving cars are here now.
They're not a thing of the future anymore.
They're not.
That's really mind-blowing.
So how does this even work?
What's under the hood of these cars?
So at the heart of it is a sophisticated sensor suite
Okay.
that basically acts as the car's eyes and ears.
So you have a vision system
LiDAR.
and radar.
All playing a critical role.
Can you explain what each of those sensors actually does?
Sure, the vision system.
Is a network of cameras that provides a 360-degree view around the car.
It helps the car see things like other vehicles,
Pedestrians.
traffic lights, and all the things you'd see out on the road.
So it's like the car has eyes all around it.
Exactly.
And then you have LiDAR.
Which stands for light detection and ranging.
Okay.
This system uses lasers to create a 3D map of the environment
It's super accurate.
and can see objects up to 300 meters away,
Wow.
even in low light.
300 meters, that's like 3 football fields.
That's crazy. And what about radar? What does that do?
So radar uses radio waves to detect objects and their movement.
Okay.
It's especially good for tracking things that are moving,
And figuring out how fast they're going.
even in bad weather.
Oh, so like rain or fog.
Yeah.
So with all these
The
sensors,
car's building like a full picture of everything around it.
exactly,
And all of this data
is constantly fed into Waymo's software.
Okay.
And that uses algorithms, including deep learning.
Deep learning, I've heard that term.
What does that actually mean?
So deep learning is a type of AI.
Where you train artificial neural networks.
On tons of data.
Yeah. So it's basically teaching a computer to learn from experience.
Okay.
Just like people do.
So in self-driving cars,
It allows the car to recognize patterns.
predict behaviors
And make decisions.
based on all the information from those sensors.
So the car is learning how to drive itself.
Like a human driver.
You got it.
But through this whole system of sensors, data, and algorithm.
That's so cool.
But they don't just let these cars out on the road, right?
How do they make sure the system is safe?
That's where something called Waymo Carcraft comes in.
Waymo Carcraft.
It's like a virtual testing ground.
Where they can simulate thousands of self-driving cars?
All driving around in different conditions.
So like a giant video game.
Kind of.
They can test out different driving situations, weather.
Even those rare things that don't happen much in the real world.
Okay.
And lets them fine-tune the algorithms, find problems.
And make improvements.
All in a safe, controlled environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
Testing in virtual worlds is one thing.
But what about testing in the real world? How has that gone for Waymo?
They have a long history of testing on the roads.
Going back to 2009.
At first, they focused on areas with good weather.
And easy roads.
So, no snowstorms or crazy traffic.
Right.
But as the tech got better,
they started testing in harder places.
They've been testing in Michigan winters for years now.
Michigan winters are tough.
Yeah.
So they're really putting these cars through it, huh?
Yeah, the goal is to expose the system to as many real-world things as possible.
So they can get better and safer.
Makes sense.
So speaking of safety, what's the safety record of Waymo's vehicles?
That's a great question.
Waymo's driven millions of miles.
And they've got a pretty good safety record.
They publish safety reports regularly.
Okay.
And they're very open about any crashes.
But there have been crashes.
There have been a few, yes.
But it's important to look at the details.
Okay.
A lot of times, a crash with a self-driving car.
It makes headlines.
But we need to find out if the self-driving system was actually at fault.
In many cases with Waymo, their vehicles were not the cause.
Okay.
It's a complex issue.
We need to look at the data and understand what happened in each case.
So even when self-driving cars are in crashes...
doesn't mean the technology is to blame.
Exactly. It's a complicated issue.
And we shouldn't jump to conclusions.
I see, but a lot of people are still nervous about these cars, right?
The idea of a car driving itself...
It's scary.
I get that.
It's a huge change.
And there have been incidents.
That haven't helped.
What kind of incidents?
Well, some people have been protesting.
Even damaging the cars.
Really?
There's this group in San Francisco.
They use traffic cones to stop Waymo and Cruise cars.
They call it coning.
Coning.
It sounds strange.
But they basically surround the cars with cones.
So they can't move.
It's their way of protesting against self-driving cars.
Wow, people have some strong feelings about this.
Some are excited about the possibilities.
While others are really skeptical.
Exactly.
And it's important to have these conversations.
As this technology keeps developing...
we need to think about the technical stuff.
But also what it means for society.
And the ethics of it all.
That's a good point. So where is all this going?
What's the future of Waymo and this whole robotaxi thing?
Well, Waymo's already doing more than just robotaxis.
Oh.
They have a division called Waymo Via.
That's focused on autonomous trucking and delivery.
Self-driving trucks, that's crazy.
It is, and they're making progress there too.
They're testing big rigs on shipping routes across the country.
They've partnered with Daimler to put their tech into Freightliner trucks.
Wow.
And they've even worked with UPS to test it in delivery vehicles.
So they're not just changing how we get around cities.
They're trying to change the whole transportation system.
That's right. It seems like they want to change how everything moves.
Both people and goods.
This is incredible.
I'm really starting to understand what Waymo is doing.
It's so much bigger than just those self-driving cars I've seen.
This deep dive has been so interesting.
I can't wait to hear more.
So what else can you tell us about the challenges and controversies?
We've only just scratched the surface.
Join us for part 2.
And we'll go even deeper.
Into all the complex stuff happening in this field.
That's changing so fast.
Hey, welcome back to our deep dive on Waymo. Last time we were talking about how these cars are actually out there on the roads now.
Picking people up and how they use all these sensors to see and understand the world around them.
Yeah, it's amazing how far the technology has come.
It really is.
But, you know...
we can't just talk about the cool tech and ignore the concerns people have.
Right, there are some real anxieties.
That we need to talk about.
Like we talked about those protests.
where people were putting cones around the Waymo car.
Yeah, the coning incidents.
It shows how some people are really worried about these cars.
So what's driving those reactions? Why are people so anxious about self-driving cars?
It's a mix of things.
Some people worry about safety.
Sharing the road with cars.
That are making their own decisions.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It's a big change.
And then there are concerns about jobs.
Especially in trucking and delivery.
That makes sense.
If the trucks are driving themselves.
What happens to the drivers?
And of course, there are ethical questions.
When machines are making decisions,
that could affect people's safety.
These are complex issues.
It's not just about the technology itself.
It's about how that technology impacts all of us.
I agree.
It's a big societal question.
So how are companies like Waymo addressing all these concerns?
Well, safety is their top priority.
Okay.
Waymo's been very open.
About all their safety testing and their record.
They've driven billions of miles.
And they're constantly collecting data.
To make their algorithms better.
And the system safer.
They're also working with regulators.
To make sure they meet all the safety standards.
So it's not just about having the technology.
It's about building trust.
Exactly.
People need to feel safe.
And what about those ethical dilemmas? You mentioned machines making life or death decisions.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Waymo is working with ethicists and AI experts
to come up with guidelines
for how their systems handle those situations.
That's good to hear.
But those job concerns.
Those are real worries for a lot of people.
They are.
It's something policymakers and industry leaders need to think about.
There's a lot of debate about what automation will do to jobs.
Some experts think new jobs will be created.
In things like software and data analysis.
So it's not as simple as robots taking everyone's jobs.
Right.
It's more complicated than that.
It's about understanding the changes and getting ready for them.
Like investing in education and training.
So people can adapt to the new jobs.
Okay. So while there are definitely challenges,
it sounds like there are also solutions.
And things we can do to manage these changes.
Exactly.
A lot depends on how we handle this as a society.
Let's shift gears a bit.
We would talk about robotaxis and trucking.
But what are some of the other things Waymo is doing? Anything particularly interesting?
They've been looking into public transportation. They've tested self-driving shuttles in some places.
The idea is that these could be a better way to do public transit.
Like little self-driving buses.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine them connecting to train stations.
Or providing transportation within neighborhoods.
It's early days.
But it could change how we think about public transit.
I could see that being especially helpful for people who don't have cars.
Or have trouble getting around.
Absolutely.
It goes back to Waymo's mission.
To make transportation safer, more efficient, and more accessible.
So it's not just about convenience for individuals.
It's about a fairer and more sustainable system for everyone.
Exactly.
That's one thing that sets Waymo apart.
They're thinking about how this technology can help solve bigger problems.
That's pretty cool.
It's like they're trying to be responsible with this innovation.
I think so.
They're not just rushing to get the tech out there.
They're taking a more careful approach.
And thinking about the long-term impacts.
That's good to know.
But Waymo isn't the only company doing this, right?
Of course not.
There are a lot of companies working on self-driving cars.
You've got Tesla.
With their autopilot.
Cruise, owned by General Motors.
Testing robotaxis in San Francisco.
Argo AI, backed by Ford and Volkswagen.
So there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, it's a very competitive field.
And each company is approaching it a little differently.
Tesla's focused on driver assistance features.
While Waymo's aiming for full autonomy.
Cruise is all about ride-hailing.
While others are looking at trucking and delivery.
So who's going to win this race?
What's going to decide that?
I think a few things are key.
Safety, of course.
Right.
Companies that can prove they're safe.
And get the public to trust them.
They'll have a big advantage.
Because if people don't trust the tech, they won't use it.
Exactly.
Cost is another big one.
Right now, self-driving systems are expensive.
Companies that can make them cheaper
will open up the market.
So it's a balancing act.
Safety, affordability, and the technology itself.
And then there are the regulations.
Different places have different rules for autonomous vehicles.
Companies that can work with government
and navigate all the legal stuff
will be in a better position.
It's not just about building the best tech.
It's about all these other challenges.
Business, societal, and legal.
You got it.
It's a really complex problem.
This conversation has really changed how I think about self-driving cars.
I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the future.
What's next for Waymo?
And for self-driving cars in general.
I'm happy to share my thoughts.
Join us for part 3.
And we'll explore what the road ahead might look like.
Welcome back to our final part in this deep dive into Waymo. We've covered a lot of ground.
From their history and tips
to the challenges and all the exciting possibilities with self-driving cars.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And,
We've talked about people's anxieties.
Safety concerns, job displacement, those tough ethical questions.
Those are important to consider.
But we've also talked about some really cool possibilities.
Self-driving trucks, delivery robots.
Those little self-driving shuttles that could change public transit, the potential is huge.
It really is, and it seems like
We're just scratching the surface.
yeah, we're at the very beginning.
And I think we'll see things we haven't even thought of yet.
So if you had to predict the future,
What do you think is next for Waymo?
where do you see them in, say, 5 to 10 years?
I think Waymo's in a good spot.
To be a leader in this?
They have so much experience.
They've been doing this for over a decade.
And their focus on safety,
All that testing they do,
that gives them an edge.
and expanding into trucking and delivery with Waymo Via,
That shows they're thinking big.
it's smart.
They're not just betting on one thing.
Exactly.
They're trying different things.
In the next few years.
I think we'll see them offering robo-taxi services in even more cities.
Maybe even in other countries.
Okay, and what about Waymo Via, their trucking and delivery stuff?
I think self-driving trucks could be even bigger than robotaxis.
Really?
There aren't enough truck drivers.
And self-driving trucks could help with that.
Plus, they can make things more efficient.
And cheaper
I predict we'll see them working with more shipping companies.
to use their technology.
It's pretty amazing to think about all the possibilities.
But we can't forget about those societal and ethical concerns.
You're right.
We need to keep talking about how this tech will affect us.
We have to think about those workers who might lose their jobs.
Figure out strong safety rules.
And really think through the ethical stuff.
So it's not just about the technology itself
It's about how we choose to use it.
and what values we build into it.
Exactly. Technology is just a tool.
We get to decide how to use it.
And whether we use it ethically.
Well said. This deep dive has been so insightful.
I've learned a ton from you, and I hope our listeners have too.
It's been great talking about this with you.
It really has, as we wrap up this exploration of Waymo.
One thing is clear.
The future of transportation is changing fast.
Self-driving cars are here.
And while there are challenges,
The potential is just huge.
from safer roads and more efficient systems,
To making transportation more accessible.
and opening up exciting possibilities we haven't even imagined yet.
The future of self-driving cars is something we all need to pay attention to.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Waymo.